Wait, let's see.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started here. It's just a couple minutes after 7. So thank you all so much for joining us. Carrie and I are so excited to see you. Tonight we are covering the different college applications. So we're going to go through kind of the differences and highlights of the Common App, the UC app, and the Cal State app. So as always, we hope you have questions and you participate, put them in the chat. We'll cover them. We'll kind of try and get through the slides as efficiently as we can, and then we can hopefully have a conversation afterwards. So I am gonna go ahead and share my screen. And thanks for joining us. I know it's summer and everybody's busy, so we're always so happy to see you. Okay, so this is our second monthly, conversation, and we will continue to do these on a monthly basis. Okay, so how do I apply to college? So we live in a state with kind of, I would say, the flagship state universities in the country. So we have two state school, the UCs and the Cal States, each have their own applications. And then pretty much every other school, with very few exceptions, use the Common App. There's also something called the Coalition app, and then some other states have their own applications too. But for the most part, you can use the Common App to apply everywhere. Right, Carrie?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what are the differences in the applications? The Common App has a lot of different things in here. There's your personal info, activity list. There's a longer essay that we're going to talk about a little later, sometimes called the personal statement, supplemental essays, which are school-specific essays, your transcript, and then letters of recommendation are sent from your teachers separately. Deadlines are kind of all over the place and really vary by school. The UC application is a little more straightforward, in my opinion. There's your personal information, activity list. You enter your courses and grades. There are 4 shorter answer, what they call personal insight questions, or you might hear the word PIQ essays. There are no teacher recommendations, and it's the same application for all campuses. So whether you apply to one UC or all the UCs, you do the same app and they all get the same information. The deadline for that one is November 30th. And then the Cal State application does not have an essay or activity list. It's really just your courses and grades, your total hours of extracurriculars, and that deadline is also November 30th. The Common application is.
You want me to jump in here?
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So just to get started on the Common App. So hopefully you've heard of the Common App. When we were growing up, there was a Common App that existed, but lots of schools didn't use it. Now over 1,000 colleges accept the Common App. So think of it as sort of a centralized, sort of general online application where you can enter generic information. So your personal information, all that demographics sort of stuff, contact info, your activities list, your essay, that 650-word essay. And then there are, extra additional information questions per school. So it's sort of a centralized thing. Students can create an account at any point. So whether you have a sophomore, a junior, or a senior right now, they can create an account and play around with it, see what's on there. They can add schools to their list. The Common App officially for the next school year opens on August 1st. So if you've already created an account before August 1st, you can transfer that over. So it'll ask you a couple questions on August 1st or after the next time you go on, log on. It'll ask you a few things, but then it'll just transfer, and it keeps all of the information that you've already entered, your schools that you've selected. It keeps all of that information. The one thing it doesn't keep is specialized stuff about the particular school. So if you've looked at supplemental essays or started to do any of that, that all gets erased, the school specific stuff. But the general stuff will all transfer over. Parents can create an account, a practice account. So I really recommend you do that. You just go to Common App and there's a section that says type of application and you say parent account. You can see what it's like. You can play around with it. It's really interesting to see what they're how it's organized and formatted. So there are ways to customize each section. So before you hit submit, you can change certain answers. For example, if you don't want to submit SAT scores to one school, but you do want to send them to a different school, you can customize that before you hit submit to each school. And that you'll also customize certain things. Obviously, each school may have different supplemental essays specific to their school. Some schools will ask specific individual questions, like about maybe a major that you're intending to apply to at that school. And you can apply to a maximum of 20 schools on the Common App. So we don't recommend applying to that many schools, but that's the maximum number that you can apply to. Okay, so on to what it looks like. So we just put some pictures up here of what it looks like, so you can kind of see. On the left, you'll see a picture of this person has created, this is my practice account, but when you create a practice account, you can add schools to your account. So once you add a bunch of schools, you'll see them on your dashboard. And then there's those tabs at the top where you can move around. And if you selected Common App, you would get to the next sort of section and you can see the circle, the oval on the right side picture. You can see they're asking for profile, family, education, testing information, activities, writing section, and then courses and grades. Some schools want you to enter all your courses and grades in the Common App. Some schools just ask for senior year grades and they ask for a transcript to be sent from your high school. So it depends. There are different requirements for different schools, and you'll see that as you enter, but you just basically are following their guidelines.
Carrie, just one thing I'm going to jump in about courses and grades.
Yeah.
So as I know you're all at different phases of the process with your kids, but whether you choose to hire someone to help you or not, like that's total personal decision. But I just would highly recommend for this part of both, anytime your child is entering their courses and grades, because they do have to do this in the UC app and the Cal State app, I would highly recommend them go. Their counselors at school are available for meetings to do this, but to have some adult at the school review how they put that in, because there are a lot of, we're not going to get into it here, but every high school kind of has different course offerings, and the people that are experts in this are your college counselors at your high school. So please, like, encourage your kids to have someone review their courses and grades in their application before they hit submit, because once that's in there, you cannot make changes, and it's what the schools see, the admissions office sees on the other side. So I just want to emphasize that it can be.
Yeah, and I would say particularly for the UCs, because most Common App schools will get your transcript from your high school, but for the UCs do not get transcripts until after you are accepted and you've taken up a spot. Then the high school sends the transcript to the UC and they will compare it to what you've self-reported on the UC. So that's where, I think we'll talk about this later, but that's particularly important. And the UC entering that information
Yeah.
can be complicated. So using a counselor at your high school or an independent counselor is really helpful there.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are the Common App essay prompts, and this is what we refer to as the personal statement. So this is a 650 word essay, and students have the opportunity to answer one of 7 prompts. And this is really the student's chance to tell their story. You can choose any of the prompts that speak to you. And there's also the 7th prompt is share an essay on the topic of your choice. So there's always that. But this is a chance for you to really show the school your traits, your values, your characteristics that you want them to see. So maybe it's something that isn't reflected somewhere else in your application. But it's really a chance for you to share that information. And it's 650 words. So that's, a little more than 2 pages, double spaced. You have a good amount of words to tell that story. And we'll talk more about this later, how this colleges view it.
Yeah. Depending on your student, it seems like either a lot or either too much or not enough. Right. So
this is where I would say this is where lots of students get really stressed writing this.
Yeah.
Writing, they think it has to be perfect. They think that it has to be a certain way and they have to provide, but it's really being authentic and telling your own story. And that's the key to this. So
for sure.
Yeah.
We'll probably do a whole session just on this.
We definitely could talk about essays completely, but this is just so you can see, this is pulled directly from the Common App, just so you can see the types of questions that they ask. I think both for the Common App and the UC app, it's really useful to look at this in advance of the process starting, just to see what are schools looking for? What are they?
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Right. Go ahead.
Okay. Supplemental essays. All right. So like we mentioned before, for many of the schools that use the Common App, there are what we call supplemental essays in the counseling world. So here are a few examples. We thought these were good examples in that like they're reflective. A lot of schools ask similar type questions. So there's not necessarily any reason we pick these schools other than their questions are similar to other schools. So the first one for Michigan, you can see is really a question about why. It's basically why you want to go to school at this school and why you want to study the thing that you're interested in at that school, right? So this question is really important like we get into this a little bit later, but to do your homework, to really understand. You don't have to necessarily have visited Michigan, but there's to really know and understand what's important. Like, why do you want to go to school there? And why is it a good fit for you as a person, right? Washington's question is really about community. So you can see here that community can really be anything. So it's really how you as a student define community and how you see yourself within that community, and then how you'll contribute to that community at Washington, right? A lot of schools have a similar kind of community question. This is really important. So it's kind of thinking about something that you're a part of and how that's been meaningful to you in high school. And then Oregon's question here is describe an experience with discrimination. So whether it was fighting against it or recognizing your contribution to an experience, and then what you learned from it, and then how you'll take those lessons to school with you. So I would say, I mean, my main takeaway from these prompts is that they really require you to deeply about either something conceptually or like discrimination, um, and or to think about what you're going to contribute, or what you want to do at that school. So um, I don't know. I don't know about you, Carrie, but I think these kinds of questions, when schools are asking them, are incredibly important to the
Yeah.
application. And admissions officers like cutting, sometimes you see kids like using recycling other essays and cutting and
Mhm.
pasting. And if we can see that as counselors, so can the people reading your applications at those schools. So it's important to really dig deep here. And
Yeah, I would say that, every year, many schools, they don't always ask the same question year after year. They think really hard, the colleges, about what they want to ask because they're trying to build a class and they're trying to say, who are the types of people that we want here? Right. So when they're reading your supplemental essays, it's, what is this student going to bring to our school? Are they going to be, how are they going to contribute to the community at our school? Um, so they think hard about these, establishing these essays, and it's up to the student to really think hard about writing them, and really kind of digging deep. And like Marian said, not leaving this to the last. This takes thought. It takes time to really consider them. And I think some kids think when after they've gotten their big essays out of the way, the personal statement, that they're gonna leave the rest. But
yeah.
big, advice to not leave this to the last minute, to really put some thought
And
time.
I mean, this also goes to it's kind of a separate or thing about applying to school, but I feel really strongly that a balanced list is somewhere in terms of numbers is somewhere between 10 and 12 schools. That would include like the UC application and the Cal State application, each is one. And part of that is that if you apply to 10 to 12 schools that all have questions or multiple questions like this, it is a lot of work for and it's doable, but it's really hard. And so you start kind of expanding that into the like potentially the 20 maximum in that Common App list. And it can just be an overwhelming amount of work for somebody,
Absolutely.
and it's unnecessary. So I just want to kind of address that too. It's a lot of
Yeah.
effort here. So um, okay, next slide. So we talked about activity lists, like what does that mean? So that's basically your extracurriculars, anything you've really done outside of school. One of the things that always comes up with students that I work with, and Carrie, I'm sure you've seen this, is like I'll have kids who, especially during COVID, might have gotten into some hobby at home or may watch like have taught themselves something over YouTube, like maybe it's a guitar or maybe it's like how to build a keyboard, and we'll do their extracurriculars. And then I'm like, well, what other things? Or their parent might look it over and be like, well, you do all this stuff on the weekends, but they don't think of it as an extracurricular because it's not like an organized activity at school or in a club, or through their church or something like that. So I would just say, like, I always say, like, if you're spending your time doing something in meaningful ways, that's something that should go on your activity list.
Mhm.
Also awards and honors at school, and really treat this like a resume, right? Like you want to put your best foot forward and really show all the things that you've spent time doing outside of school, that complement your academic experiences. And this is just this is an example. So like the first example, I was a barista at Mince and Honey and learned how to make drinks and serve customers. Like, okay, great. The second one, like I worked register, customer service, preparing and memorizing recipes, bussing tables, opening, closing, gain responsibilities, and work well with coworkers. So, I mean, you can see the difference here. Like the first one is sort of just scratches the surface, but you really should be thinking about your activity list and like what are you actually doing in those activities, and be descriptive. So use all those
Use those
words.
verbs, those
Yeah.
active verbs. If you
Totally.
guys, parents can help with this because you've written resumes and you know what they look like and you've used active verbs, but it really makes a big difference.
I mean, my favorite is like when someone's spent hundreds of hours in a sport and they just write like went to practice, right? Like it's so
Mhm.
much more than that, right? So, but it can be hard. It's hard for a 17, 18-year-old to think about some of these things more descriptively. So
Yeah,
adults can definitely help with this.
yeah.
Um, okay. And then the just like the question always is like, what's the most important thing? Like what's really important to schools? So Carrie mentioned this before, but I always say to students, like, the application, you're telling a story about yourself, right? So when someone's reading your application, they're going to have all those pieces of your application, your grades, your extracurriculars, your recommendations, and the essay, and all those things should kind of be like it's like a puzzle. You're putting all that together and telling your story to the school. Um, for selective schools, obviously the rigor, the kinds of courses you're taking and your grades are the first thing they're going to review, but they do look at all parts of your application. And we mentioned this before, but as schools are test optional and the world is changing, like essays are really more important than they've ever been. And then again, we mentioned this already with the supplemental essays, but like, have you done your homework? And do you really want to go to the school? It's not just, cutting and pasting stuff that you find online or talking about their football team, because that happens too. So um, anyway, tell your story. That's my main takeaway from this. Okay. UC application.
Okay, so let's jump into the UC application then. So just how it differs from the Common App, it does differ in a lot of different ways. And we talked about the first point, which is students self-report all their courses and grades. So every course that you've taken, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you will enter those in one by one. And it's a complicated process. So definitely, as Marianne suggested, check in with your counselor, use the resources at your high school. Often high schools will have handouts to talk about it, or they'll have a video that shows how to do it. But if you have a question about, for example, like at certain schools, they might have life skills as a section for a history or social studies section, and it might be a quarter class. So we have to enter that differently than you enter a semester class. So just do that carefully. The essay, obviously, as you know, probably the UC don't take SAT or ACT scores. So there is no area to enter that, but you can enter AP scores in the UC application. The activity lists that we just talked about are more detailed in the UC application. You have 350 characters to describe an activity that you're involved in for the UC app, as opposed to the Common App, you have 150 characters. So you can use more of those active verbs. You can talk more about, expand upon your duties, your obligations, your accomplishments. You also, in the UC app, you have 20 spaces for activities, awards, and honors. In the Common App, you have 10 spots for activities and 5 spots for awards and honors. So sometimes kids who have a lot of activities have to choose in the Common App, which 10 am I going to choose? Some kids are going to have a handful. They might have 3 or 4 activities. Just because there's 10 slots doesn't mean you have to fill them all up. Or 20 spots on the UC application doesn't mean you have to fill them up. But if you do have that many, then you have to prioritize sort of what you're going to include and what you're not. The essays for the UCs are, they're called the personal insight questions. They're 350 words each. There are 8 prompts, and you choose 4 of them. And we'll show them to you in a little bit. But you have a choice of 4 of 8. And there's no supplementals. That's it. It's just 4 350-word essays. So you can apply to all the UCs with the same app. You will have to customize a little bit with choice of major, for example. Like if you're applying to Berkeley, they might want to know your major, whereas UC San Diego wants to know your major, and it might be a different one. So you're not applying to all the UCs for the same major. But so they review them completely independently. If you've applied to UC Santa Barbara and UC Davis, they don't know that you've applied to the other. They completely, so just if it's not like, oh, I'm gonna get into SB, so UC San Diego won't let me in because they know I've gotten into one and not the, so they review completely independently. They will ask for some information in the application that's not considered during admission. So like race, income level of the parents. Race is not, we're not allowed in California. The admissions offices are not allowed to admit by race. So to look at that, so it's on the application because they use it for demographics after the fact. So they know what their class makeup is, but it's not used for admissions. Just in the application, you can't jump around. So in the Common App, when you go in and create a practice account, you can jump around and see a little bit like what's what and what's where. Sometimes in the UC, in certain sections, you need to complete one section before you can get to another. So that's a little bit different. There's a big scholarship section in the UC app where they will ask you if you'd like to be considered for scholarships. And they're often very specific, like, they're like women engineers. Like if you're applying to an engineering program and you're a woman, do you want to be considered for this women in engineering scholarship? Again, like the Common App, the UC app opens on August 1st, and you can submit it anytime between October 1st and November 30th. But that's a hard deadline, is November 30th. So, anything you want to add there, Marianne?
No, that's good.
And then, okay, so this is how the UCs review applications. It's a holistic review, and they look at both academic and non-academic factors. So there's 13 different points that they review on. Academics are important, right? So they're looking at your GPA, your performance, and the number of courses beyond your basic A to G requirements, the rigor of your classes, how you've taken advantage of the opportunities within your school. So every school has different offerings, right? But within your school, have you taken the more challenging classes? Have you stretched yourself within the opportunities you've had? Outstanding performance in one or more subject areas, recent marked improvement in academic performance as demonstrated by academic GPA and quality of coursework. So the UCs don't consider your 9th grade courses that in your GPA. So it's really your 10th and 11th grade courses that you're using. They're looking at your senior year classes, but it's really 10th and 11th grade that they're considering in their A to G GPA. And GPA in general, a UC GPA. Okay, and then in the non-academic area, they're looking at achievement in special projects, talents, achievements, and awards. And those are things that they get through the activity section and the awards and honors section. They look at improvement. So if you had a rough sophomore year, but you made big improvement your junior year, that really counts for something. And I think that's true for all schools, but they like to see, much more than the other way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if you've taken advantage of any outside or prep programs that are either offered at your high school or outside, academics, and then finally the location of your school. because they also want to have a balanced class, coming from different locations. So, yeah. Okay, and then these are directly, so the UCs put on conferences every year for us counselors, and these are just things that we hear all the time, and they're really helpful for us so that we can pass them on to our students. But grades are really important to the UCs, right? So it's your overall performance. That's why they don't take the SATs or ACT, the testing. So they really look at sort of your performance overall in school and classes that you're taking. So they want you to take classes that interest you and that challenge you. When you're writing your PIQs, they don't want a lot of extra fluff, right? And sometimes you'll hear when people are writing their personal statement for the Common App that they are trying to come up with a hook, right? Or a funny anecdote to start the essay. The UCs don't want that at all. They just want straight to the point. Tell us your story. Tell us about what you did and what you've learned from it, right? So there are some questions that are optional questions, like the thing that I suggested before, the parent income, family size, those are optional, but, and sorry, the family income is not considered in admissions, but parents' level of education. And I think some parents hesitate to fill that out because they think maybe they'll hold it against the student or they'll, for some reason, but it does give personal context to this student's application. So we don't discourage people from including that information. There is an additional information section, both in the UC app and the Common App. It's really specifically for explaining something that is really out of the ordinary for you in your circumstances. So an extenuating circumstance, it's if you had, a parent lost their job and you didn't have a place to live for a long time, or something really extenuating. You don't want to use that section to like, oh, I actually have 21 activities. I'm going to put that in the additional information section. So use it appropriately, that additional information section. Oh, complete the activity section. That's a no-brainer, but some students just think maybe I don't need to do that, or I'm not going to do it as well as I could because whatever, it's not that important. It's really important to the UCs. Mm-hmm. And then, think about, this context is important. They really want to know your story. They want to know who you are and what opportunities you've taken advantage of. So it's just a little tips from the admissions officers themselves. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the personal insight question kind of section of the UC. So you can see that you choose 4 of 8. We just thought it might be helpful for you to see these. There's a couple down here, and then these are the other prompts. The thing that I will just mention kind of to piggyback on what Carrie was saying about on the last slide is that you can see here that there's, you're choosing 4 of 8, and there's a couple questions in here that are about educational opportunities or an academic subject that inspires you. I tell all the students I work with they really need to answer at least one, if not more, questions about, yes, it's up to you to pick these questions, but given the UC's emphasis on academics and the fact that you do not have teacher recommendations as part of your application, I think it's really important that at least one of the questions you answer is about an area that that is interesting to you, that maybe like you want to continue studying in your major, or, is an area of interest that you want to continue exploring in college. I think students that don't do that are at a real disadvantage. So, um, just sharing that piece. The other thing I'll say is that, this question number 3, like, what would you say your greatest talent or skill is? That can be anything from I think sometimes, people read that and say, oh gosh, like what talent do I, that could be like being a good listener, being patient. Like, again, like this goes back to, what do you want schools to know about you? And then thinking about how those questions really relate to things that are important to you. So you can get creative in how you answer these. It's more kind of sharing stuff that's important to you as a student. Okay, so how can you support your student with the application? So I think Carrie and I both feel strongly that it's important to give students space to get the work done. Um, Obviously, asking questions and showing them that you're interested is awesome, but hovering and, asking too many questions, I guess finding that balance is really important. If you're not working with a private counselor, I think it's really helpful to have a timeline. That's like one of the things that I work on with students is making sure that you understand like all. I mean, I'm sure your probably eyes are cross-eyed from all the stuff we just went over, but if you don't have that all mapped out and have an understanding of when everything's due, I think it's really hard to get stuff done. But it also, I think, helps your family understand like, okay, these are the things that I'm working on, and you can give your students some space, knowing that those things are kind of chugging along in the calendar. Regular check-ins are great, offering support, maybe, back to that activity list, like maybe asking like, how's your activity list going? Can we, at some point, do you want to go over that with me? The UCs have awesome guidance. One things, as much as the UCs I know are competitive and hard to get into, they are super supportive and direct with the information they provide. So there's a lot of resources available to students and families. Every school has admissions officers. These big state schools they have people that are like that are assigned to your high school. So if you go to Sarah, like there is an admissions officer who knows your school, who works in this region. So if they have questions, like reach out to those people. They're the people that are reading your applications. And I know it's a daunting thing for, sometimes it's intimidating for kids, but really encourage them to do that. That's what they're there for. Make sure that you're sending the right information to each school. Again, back to that customized specifics. And this is my favorite and probably the most important. It makes sure the application that reads like your student wrote it, not you, right? So the voice again, we hear all the time from admissions officers like this application sounded like a 50-year-old person wrote it, not a 17-year-old. Like they know when your child hasn't written something. So don't think you can trick them by putting it into chat GPT, right? So anyway, that's just these are great guidelines I think to follow. Carrie, anything else?
No, I was going to say that we'll get into the CSU applications just briefly too, but they also have really good guidance. So use the guidance, like Marianne's saying. I mean, there's online resources, and then there's the colleges directly themselves. They always are telling us, have a student reach out to the admissions office, but let the student do it themselves. Right? Don't do it on their behalf, because I think that's part of, growth and learning. So they can reach out to the regional rep, they can call the admissions office directly, they can send an email if they have questions on specifics about the school or, the application. Okay, so here's about the CSU. So these are the Cal States, right? There are 23 Cal States, Cal State universities in California. The they really, compared to the UC and the Common App, the Cal State application is a very simple application. They are looking at grades and courses, and you are responsible, like you are on the UC, for entering all of those courses and your grades. So again, do it really carefully, use a counselor. You will go through and select which schools you want to apply to, which locations, and within those locations, you'll select a major and sometimes an alternate major. And there is not an essay, and there is not a spot for activities. They do ask you a simple question on how many hours per week you spend on extracurriculars. So they want to see how involved you are in other things, but they do not, compared to the others, it's much simpler. And it's called Cal State Apply. They have excellent guidance as well. And I'm sorry we didn't put the link in here, but you can definitely use their website to look at which campuses are impacted. Some campuses in the UC and the Cal State system are very impacted with all majors, and those are like Cal Poly, San Diego State. So they may look at additionally at more specifics of your coursework and grades than some other schools that are not impacted. And yeah, so all that information is on their website. So you can definitely look and see, where the campuses are, that if I apply with my 2.5 GPA, I'll be able to get in with that. Because that's sort of for the CSUs, it's a 2.5 or greater GPA on your A to G coursework. But obviously on those impacted campuses, it's going to be a much, much higher GPA because the spots just aren't there. So again, this application opens on October 1st and needs to be sent in by November 30th.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's it. But so this is just the final slide. We were a week late this month in getting this together because of travel situations, and but we're gonna do our next one, and I think it's just 3 weeks.
Yeah.
July 12th. And we'd love to hear from you guys about, these are just some ideas that we've had about our next one. If there's anything that you particularly are like, really wanting to hear immediately, sooner than later, let us know. And there's one more slide, Marianne.
Okay.
Just yeah. So otherwise we'll select, but let us know if there's anything.
You have a couple of questions in the chat, Carrie.
Okay.
So, oh yeah, sorry, it was about major selection, but it looks like we covered it. So, yeah, majors are a challenge. I think that it's really a school by school conversation and exploration, and just like, kind of spending time researching each school. I think you need to do the same thing when you're thinking about majors. And I'm just putting that out there. I know this was not the topic for tonight, but there are a million other majors other than business and engineering, because that's what everybody wants to do who lives in Silicon Valley. So I'm constantly trying to get students to explore other things. So anyway, that's a topic for another, I'll save that for another night. But anyway, yeah. Any other questions?
Millie, go ahead and just unmute yourself.
Yep. Hi, guys. Yeah, when I saw your slide about extracurriculars, I mean, what do you think is an average of the extracurriculars that you're seeing kids? Well, maybe I shouldn't ask that question because here in Silicon Valley, these kids may have 10 extracurriculars, but like, what do you think the schools are looking for in variety of extracurriculars? 5, I mean, or it depends on the school.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the school, and I think that it depends on obviously the selectivity of the school. And, maybe the more highly selective schools are looking for sort of a progression in leadership roles, or and sort of that kind of by the time you've gotten to your senior year, then maybe you've taken on more of a leadership role in whatever activity that you're involved in. But it's not that any the schools have a preference of activities. They don't prefer an arts activity, sort of theater over sports, or there's nothing like that. And I don't know if we can say necessarily what the number is. It's
Yeah,
really,
no, I know that was a hard question. That wasn't really a
Yeah.
fair question either. I think I'm trying to come up with a way for my kids to just think about this in a,
Yeah.
I don't know, holistic, like very interested in one thing and they're just doing that, you know what I mean? And so great, going deep in that. But I don't know, should we consider other things? Like I tried to, hint, but it's gone
And
nowhere.
I'd say like also quality. I mean, I understand what you're saying about exploring more things. And I think that can be a challenge with students. Like they like the thing they're doing or the couple of things, and they don't see why they have to do anything else. But I really look at it like quality over quantity. Like I think, you can have 3 activities that you've done all through school that are really meaningful to you, that you've spent a lot of time doing, and someone else might have 10 that they're kind of I always like,
Yeah.
you're putting in the time you're spending at those things and how much of the year you do that thing. It's much more meaningful to have a couple things that you've done consistently and spent a lot of time doing than like, I've had students who have like these laundry lists of activities, but when you really dig into it, it's like, oh, I did this thing for a couple hours here and a couple hours there.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't, it's like, I always say, like, if you're going to sit down in an interview or something, talk to someone about what would you say? Right. And they can't, it's more that, but I also think it's hard. That's part of like what I think it's looking at, like, okay, well, maybe exploring something at school, or I don't know. I love jobs. I personally like work.
I do too. And I would put a little plug in for community service as well. I mean, I think that sometimes it's not to say that everybody needs to check a community service box, but I think there is real value in being involved in something and giving back.
Sure.
And I think that is something that students really can grow from, and that can be a part of their application, that the sense of growth and understanding, having volunteered somewhere. But again, not going here for an hour, to serve food for an hour, and then, somewhere else at the library for an hour, so it's more sort of thinking like, what's important to you? Like as a student, like as a person, if you're going to give back, where would you want to do that? Right. So, sometimes if students are really focused on a particular sport or a particular, theater, and they do all that, sometimes taking a look at what else they could do. And maybe it's they don't have time for a job, but maybe it's a community service option.
Yeah,
that's a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Carrie, we got a question about what are the benefits of hiring someone to help through the process? So
go for it, Mary.
Gosh, I mean, there's so many things. Like the biggest thing I think I'd say is that I think there's when I talk to families, it's like I look at the work that I do with students and kind of a couple different phases, but there's the guidance through high school of like selecting horses and making sure that you're like really thinking about things in the best way to prepare yourself for college when it comes to your academic choices, and also providing guidance with things outside of school. And then, I mean, the majority of the time I spend with students I work with is in the application process itself. So I think having that guidance and someone who has expertise in understanding the application and helping you through that. And also, I think preserving family dynamics so you can enjoy the process with your child and not be stressed out and worried. Because I've had families like where I've worked with the second or third kids because they went through it the first time and didn't hire anyone, and they were like, it almost, it was just such a stressful, difficult time for them. So those are my main high level things.
I would echo all of that. Definitely agree with all of that. And I would say also sometimes, this is a process that for students, it takes some time and some reflection. And sometimes that's really hard. That reflection piece is hard to do with a parent. As much as the parent thinks they know the child, but the child doesn't want to hear it from them. So it's like, part of our job is to sort of help them reflect on their experiences and see where they want to go. And that it can be really useful to do that with someone outside of the family. Sort of echoing.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a part of what we loved doing, right? Is you
Right.
have a student come to you and says, I don't have anything to write about. There's nothing interesting that's ever happened to me. I'm really boring. And, it's our job to really say, okay, there's more to you than that, right?
The other thing that I'll just say is that do not start Googling college essay topics. Like this happens. I'm not saying that that's like something that anyone, but I will just say that there, like what Carrie said before about essays, there is no right or wrong way to answer. It really is what is meaningful to you. So, I've just seen that there's like, I feel like half the time when I see the examples that are online, I'm like, there's no way. I've read hundreds of essays. There's no way a student actually wrote those. Like some adult wrote them trying to answer them as, creatively as possible. And the other thing is there is no hook. There is no kind of magic. There's like, sometimes they say that you have to follow these steps. That stuff is not true. And you can ask admissions officers that too, if you're visiting places with your kids. Like there's just, it's really the authenticity is what schools are looking for in those essays. So that was my thing for today. So anyway, yeah, so we'll let you all know what our next topic is. Hope this was helpful tonight, and really appreciate you all joining us.
Yeah, and encourage anyone else if they're interested in some more information to just sign up on we'll just keep the mailing list going, and just before each month session, we'll just send out a Zoom link and go from there.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us,
Thank
you guys.
You, everyone.
Happy summer.
Good night.
Thank you
Good
so much.
night.